Let's jump straight into our explainer today, where we're unpacking the dramatic script, The Last Service. We are looking at the incredibly swift and honestly stunning collapse of a master chef's world. It's this fascinating character study of a man whose entire existence is built on immaculate, perfect presentation. But what actually happens when that presentation is violently stripped away?
We're dropped right into the thick of the action with this incredibly defensive demand from our protagonist, Jean. It sets the central tension immediately. He barks this at Anne, the PR director of the Plaza Athénée, in the very first scene. And man, it perfectly captures a guy who's desperately clinging to legal definitions simply because he is rapidly losing his grip on the court of public opinion.
So what really happens when a celebrated chef's private actions completely obliterate his public legacy? That question right there frames our entire analysis today. We're breaking down a man who is literally forced to confront the total collapse of his carefully constructed reality. We're going to look at the anatomy of this downfall, step by step through the script, to see exactly how a towering culinary empire can crumble in just a matter of hours.
Let's start with part 1, the fall from grace, control versus chaos.
We start out in this pristine kitchen at the Plaza Athénée. Jean has this obsessive control over literally a single crooked pea on a plate, which creates this stark contrast with the utter chaos his life is about to become. 11. That's the number of years of Michelin stars Jean has earned, and they're all just erased in an instant to protect the hotel's brand. When Anne, the PR director, tells him the board is replacing him, Jean is baffled. He brings up those 11 years like a shield. But, as we see in the world of corporate PR, past culinary perfection absolutely doesn't outweigh a present-day public relations disaster. Just look at how fast this crisis escalates. For years, Jean relied on this super convenient story, right? He claimed his partner, Alexandra, broke her nose falling off a treadmill back in 2013. But the present-day timeline moves at breakneck speed. The moment Alexandra gives a public interview, the dam breaks. Other women come forward almost instantly, which triggers a 6 a.m. emergency board meeting, leading straight to Jean being scheduled for police custody, or garde à vue, at 9 a.m. the next morning. Talk about a masterclass in narrative tension. Desperate to manage the fallout, Anne coldly offers him this hollow title of artistic director. It's basically a PR life raft, a way for the hotel to distance itself while saving face with a quiet exit. But Jean, he identifies purely as a cook, and he bitterly rejects it. He literally says, "I'm a cook, not a painter." It just goes to show how deeply his identity is tied to the physical act of running his kitchen. And now, that identity is being forcibly ripped away. Which brings us to part 2, anatomy of a cover-up, the voicemail and the pattern. The cover-up really begins to unravel with a chilling voicemail from his ex-partner, Alexandra. It strips away that whole treadmill lie completely. Her voice is soft, it's trembling, explaining she just wants him to stop. And yet Jean's immediate gut reaction is to hover his thumb over his phone and just delete the proof. He's presented with the raw, emotional truth of his abuse, and his instinct is to simply erase it, exactly like wiping down a dirty counter in his kitchen. Now, the really crucial point is this number, 3. 3 other women called the prosecutor right after Alexandra, establishing a clear, systemic pattern of behavior. It makes Jean's old treadmill excuse completely impossible to maintain. Like Anne pointed out earlier, pattern is the exact word the prosecutors are using. This is no longer some isolated incident you can brush off as a clumsy gym accident. The walls are closing in for sure. Let's move to part 3, 2 chefs, 2 choices, the foil. So Jean is forced to hand over his kitchen to his replacement, Jocelyn Herland, and it creates this brilliant narrative foil. On one hand, Jean is desperately blaming the pressure of the Michelin-star world for snapping. He's defensive, he's frantic, he's literally busy erasing evidence. But then you have Jocelyn. He arrives with this incredibly calm presence, zero ego. He just walks to the pass and evaluates the kitchen. Where Jean sees himself as a victim of his high-stress environment, Jocelyn remains completely unflappable. Jean tries to justify his behavior, claiming anyone would snap under the pressure in the cameras. But Jocelyn just dismantles those excuses with this powerful line, driving home the core theme of personal accountability. Jocelyn points out he's been cooking for 30 years and has never hit a pan or a person. He completely removes the excuse of the environment, placing the burden of Jean's actions exactly where they belong, on his own choices. The tension absolutely peaks here when Jocelyn reveals he was actually standing right there watching Jean delete Alexandra's voicemail. Jocelyn asks this devastating question, forcing Jean's mask to finally crack. Jocelyn isn't trying to be a judge or an enemy. He just wants to know the truth about the guy whose recipes he has to serve tonight. Faced with this inescapable mirror, Jean drops the act. He just whispers, "I don't know anymore." It's really the very first moment of genuine self-awareness we get from him.
And that leads us to part 4, the final surrender, the reckoning.
This final act strips away every last piece of Jean's armor. It starts symbolically outside the hotel, where he takes off his white chef's jacket and leaves it on the pavement. The chef is dead. Only the man remains. The next morning at the police station, Jean is sitting in a bare room in just a simple shirt. He physically looks smaller. The detective walks in and lays out an undeniable wall of evidence that completely shatters Jean's illusion of control. We're talking 3 corroborating statements, horrifying details about the bathroom lock, and crucially, text messages from Jean himself where he apologizes but blames Alexandra, saying, "You made me do it."
Connecting right back to that voicemail from earlier, this quote from the detective hits like a ton of bricks. It directly dismantles Jean's lie right there in the interrogation room. The detective just completely refuses to let Jean hide behind his old excuses anymore. Those text messages aren't proof of an accident, they are a written confession of abuse and manipulation.
John is totally backed into a corner here. Out of options, he weakly tries to defend himself by claiming he loved Alexandra, and the detective delivers this incredibly sharp, undeniable truth. It's a profoundly sobering moment in the script that cuts right through any lingering romanticization of his toxic behavior. The detective isn't interested in arguing about Jean's feelings, he's stating a stark, physical fact. Stripped of his stars, his pristine kitchen, and his intricate lies, Jean is reduced to this quiet, vulnerable plea. It signals his total surrender to the truth. He puts his head in his hands. That charismatic, controlling, untouchable master chef we met in the very first scene, he is completely gone. What is left is just a broken man facing the reality of his own actions. Now, as an impartial explainer of this script, it's vital we highlight the story's final title card. It reminds us that, legally, the investigation is ongoing as of August 3, 2026. Jean Imbert remains presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The script presents an intense narrative of a downfall, but it does ground itself in the reality of the ongoing legal process.
So, I'll leave you with this provocative thought to ponder, because this story brilliantly demonstrates how a legacy built on absolute culinary perfection can never truly hide the reality of our private choices. The Last Service is a total masterclass in tension, and it shows us that no matter how perfectly you plate the food or how obsessively you control your environment, the truth always, always finds a way onto the menu.